Have you ever asked yourself, was it really love? Or was it just obligation? Well, today I want to talk about something that's hard to face, especially it was hard for me to face it. And especially for those who spent years, even decades, inside the Jehovah's Witness culture. In the organization, marriage is treated more like a contract than a covenant of love. And you're encouraged to marry, but only to another witness. Baptized, may I say, if the witness was raised in what they call the truth, not baptized, they're not eligible to marry. You're told that it's a gift from Jehovah, but really, it's a tool of control. It's a way to serve the organization better, a way to appear successful in the congregation's eyes. Real love, deep, enduring love, it's not talked about much. What's emphasized is roles, appearances, submission, endurance. And for many couples, that's exactly what their marriage becomes. You know, they sit there, how many hours did you get today? I was out with so-and-so, the pioneer, and I got all these hours. That's what they talk about at supper. Now, fast forward 40, 50, even 60 years later. What happens when your one partner gets sick? When dementia sets in? When taking care of each other becomes hard? In a marriage built on genuine love, you would expect tenderness, care, sacrifice. But in too many cases among Jehovah's Witnesses, what you find instead is coldness, withdrawal, and abandonment. I've seen it. I've felt it personally. The truth is, many marriages inside the Watchtower were never built on real love to begin with. They were built on loyalty to the Watchtower organization, on fear of being alone, on the pressure to fit in. And when those external pressures weaken, when life gets messy, there's no real bond to hold it all together. You know, that's when your mate calls the elders on you. Well, Miss Usato, she captured this heartbreaking reality better than I ever could. Her article, It's Not Love, is raw, honest, and full of compassion for those who are now suffering because of a lifetime spent chasing an illusion. And out of respect for her words and for all the elderly who find themselves abandoned by those they thought would love them forever, I want to share her article with you now, and I'm going to read it in full. Okay, so here we are. We're on Avoid JW. And you notice at the very top there, I'm going to make my face disappear here. It says more than 10 years revealing secrets because there's no excuse for secrecy in religion. And they quote some scriptures in the Watchtower. So more than 10 years Avoid JW has been around, exposing the Watchtower's secrets. And we're going to expose Watchtower's secrets today on marriage. What goes on inside a Jehovah's Witness marriage. So let's lead you through this. We'll let Miss Usato have the reins here. Now this is part 3. I ran all the first 2 parts in earlier videos. Not too long ago, so this is part 3 on this subject. It's not love, and she went through to talk about what it's like to be a young person, a teenager, and so now we're getting into marriages and the elderly. And in the picture, you can see a young girl growing up in this religion and getting old. And on the outside, you could see different male figures hollering at them, pointing at them, probably elders or husbands. This is what it's like. This is published by Miss Usato on April 20th, 2025. So this is really new stuff, folks. And in this article, It's Not Love, Part 3, Marriages and the Elderly, we explore how Jehovah's Witness organization enforces strict expectations on marriages and their elderly members. Behind the image of spiritual unity lies a pattern of emotional neglect, suppressed individuality, and profound loneliness, especially among older couples who have remained loyal to the faith for decades. Now, many elders, Jehovah's Witnesses, suffer in silence within loveless or emotionally abusive marriages, discouraged from separating or seeking personal peace out of fear of displeasing God or the threat of disfellowshipping. I am not saying that every single marriage or elderly person, Jehovah's Witness, has a loveless life. This article is to help open the eyes of those who may be confused, depressed, and in need of advice on this specific topic. This article has quotes from former and still active Jehovah's Witnesses who will remain anonymous. So Dr. Lee, if you remember folks from the other articles, he's a former Jehovah's Witness, and he's a now practicing therapist. He shares insight into the emotional toll that the organization's teachings take on marriages and elderly members. Now, Dr. Lee, Jehovah's Witness members often feel trapped in marriages they entered as teenagers without autonomy, choice, or health models of emotional intimacy. And fear has a strong hold in marriages that don't mend well, which also goes for devoting your life as a witness when older. And they were told to endure and wait for the new system. But what happens when you've spent your whole life waiting and nothing comes? Okay, so the first topic is the marriage dynamic. Jehovah's Witnesses view a threefold cord marriage as a spiritual bond that includes the husband, the wife, and Jehovah God as the third cord, a concept rooted in the scripture of Ecclesiastes 4 and verse 12. Now, they view Jehovah as a central part of the marriage, and that his involvement in your decisions, your routines, and thought processes strengthens it spiritually and emotionally. So did you get that, folks? Jehovah is the central part of the marriage. Now, even though it says Jehovah, it's really the watchtower, folks, is the central part of your marriage. The whole part of the watchtower. Because anytime you're having marriage trouble, they always tell you to look up all these articles in the watchtower to get Jehovah's mind on it. So, Jehovah's mind on things. So, it goes on to talk, this godly order can sound innocent enough, but it can lead to some really toxic dynamics, especially when their doctrines are prioritized over emotional well-being. And in this type of marriage dynamics, the husband is the head, who is used to making decisions and can dominate or silence wives rather than lead them with empathy and humility. The wife must submit to and encourage her husband's role, and if problems arise in the marriage, praying and waiting on Jehovah for the answers is the main advice. If they cannot figure it out, elders are invited to become involved in the matter. It is a disfellowshipping offense to divorce unless there was a sexual immorality. So they bring the elders in, the watchtower. That's how Jehovah's in your marriage. Now, how would you characterize the organization's approach to marriage and its dynamics? Dr. Lee says, honestly, it's pretty awful. I'd say toxic and very tricky. Marriage already has so many dynamics that can be problematic even without involving religion. I've met so many Jehovah's Witnesses who got married at 18 because they wanted to have sex. And that's why many Jehovah's Witnesses do. So they completely skip over the critical part in your life, to learn about yourself first. And not many know this, and it may seem silly or too late, but learning to know and love yourself is important to a healthy dynamic with anybody in any matter. And having multiple partners before you buckle down can also give you a sense of what you like and want, but not everyone goes that route. Instead of promoting individuality, the organization locks marriage into a lifetime agreement. This threefold cord arrangement with God, and for someone, they may have just been horny for at 18. Now, in the Jehovah's Witness world, marriage is often rushed and idealized. Discouraged from dating freely or exploring healthy relationships, young people are funneled into lifelong commitments, often by the age 18 or 19. And the motivation, not typically love, not typically compatibility, but the pressure to avoid fornication. The pressure to avoid fornication. And the teaching elevates virginity above emotional maturity and abstinence above relation or rational wisdom. So here's an anonymous Mary. This is one of the people that they're talking to. And she's a Jehovah's Witness. Now she says, I felt pressured to marry my husband, and when we turned 18, not from him, but everyone else in the congregation, eyes were always on us. We were never alone. It was expected of you to marry after dating for a while. And of course, we wanted to have sex. It seemed like the only right thing we could do was to get married. Well, it's been 14 years now. I still love him and know he loves me, but so many differences are hard to ignore. Now, a few references to the Jehovah's Witness publications regarding this topic. The Watchtower, November 1st, 1986, page 30, question from the readers. It says, some may marry simply because they cannot control their sexual urges. So the Apostle Paul said, if they do not have self-control, let them marry. For it's better to marry than to be inflamed with passion. So you're better to marry than to masturbate. That's kind of what I'm hearing. I don't know if that's sound counsel. However, Christian marriage is not just a license for sexual intimacy. It is a lifelong commitment. And marrying in honor, the Watchtower 1960, today when Jehovah's dedicated witnesses get engaged to marry, they may have no sexual intercourse with each other before they are formally married. And if they do, if they don't exercise self-control, they've committed fornication. And that usually ends up leading to disfellowshipping. Okay, so that's a lot of pressure. Now, trapped without autonomy. Many times when Jehovah's Witnesses marry, they do so without knowing who they even are, causing confusion, worry, and needing the approval of others that they are normal. Eventually, this confusing marriage that bonds are fully entwined with the religious doctrine, many years can go by without exploring your wants and needs. And this turns into a toxic environment. And you put up with each other's differences because you think it's an act of love. Well, Dr. Lee, he says many become locked into a lifeless marriage. A lifeless marriage. Have you ever experienced that? Anybody in the room experienced that? Just raise your hand. I know what that's like, 28 years. Now, once in a while, yes, one finds someone aligned with what they like and what they want in a person, and that's the exception. The organization holds these marriages to a standard, and it's another version. If you're unhappy, there's something wrong with you. So they continue to internalize this shame and try to make it work even though it doesn't. If you're unhappy, there's something wrong with you. Sex becomes the starting point of marriage, not the fruit of a solid foundation. And when the high of desire fades, many couples find themselves trapped in a mismatched, emotionally hollow partnership with no fundamental tools for communication or for growth. Think of it that way. Sex is a really driving need, or drives a lot of us, and drives you into that, and you forget it. You don't see all the other things. Whereas if you just had sex whenever you wanted, or safe sex, you could get to know that person better. That's what I think is being said here. Now, Dr. Lee, he says, when you marry quickly, you're robbed of sensual development, milestones such as forming your own identity separate from your parents, dating, sex, and experiences at school, learning how to integrate with other people, how to become social, what you like and don't care for. These things are so important. And learning all these things while married is extremely difficult. It can be done, but typically not without some space, mutual understanding, and respecting your partner to grow how they need to. Some people, when that happens, they become insecure, the other partner, when one partner starts to grow. So there's a lot of challenges to do that inside a marriage. Better to do it outside. Goes on to say, being a Jehovah's Witness often means surrendering personal autonomy, but for women in this organization, that sacrifice runs especially deep. Now, wives, be submissive. How does the organization view wives? Dr. Lee says, well, for starters, the man is the head of the household. That means he needs to be in charge. And this speaks out that aside from locking people into an unhappy marriages, they also reinforce abusive marriages. He's right. So that's what that is, folks. It's abusive. I'm the head of the house because I'm male. It's racist, too. Okay, so women are there to be housewives. This is what Jehovah's Witnesses teach. This is what Dr. Lee says. This doctor, therapist. Now he says if she speaks out or has a rule or boundary, that's problematic. And then they look down on the family because the husband couldn't be keeping his wife in line. I know what that feels like. Now, as shown in the previous 2 articles of It's Not Love from a young age, girls are taught that their highest virtue lies in submission. Not only to God, but to the male authority figures at every level. So what would that be? Elders, husbands, even congregation overseers. Now you see that's why there's so much CSA in the congregation. Now the organization's interpretation of headship leaves little room for a woman's independent decision making, especially within a marriage. A wife is expected to support her husband's choices, even if they conflict with her own values, comfort, or emotional well-being. The expectation isn't just cultural doctrine. Publications and congregational discipline reinforce it. Choices about careers, friendships, education, and even healthcare often require a kind of silent negotiation with the male authority in the family. And as a result, many women feel emotionally stifled, unheard, and spiritually concerned or spiritually cornered, or trapped in a role they didn't choose, with no safe path to question it without being labeled rebellious or spiritually weak. You remember that one, spiritually weak. So-and-so spiritually weak. Well, why isn't your wife at the meeting? Well, she's spiritually weak. The husband doesn't say that, but the people walk away thinking that. And they probably drive home and saying, yeah, sister so-and-so must be spiritually weak. We don't see her at the meetings. Maybe she's being beaten down by her husband, or maybe there's other reasons, but she's spiritually weak. She's not at the meetings. So here's another one, Anonymous Rose. She's a former Jehovah's Witness. Here's what she says. She says, as a Jehovah's Witness, I definitely did not like the constant reminder that I didn't have much of a say regarding big decisions for the family or even just for myself. It was degrading and depressing. And in time, I noticed I was basically a female version of my husband. My marriage is over now, And I have been shunned by my family that I've called my own since. But there were so many issues with both of us, and I'm happier that I was feeling stuck. I'm happier than I was feeling stuck. So she's happier now, of course, than when she was feeling stuck. She says, I found someone who respects me, so it sounds like she's got a new partner. And she says, I look back at the woman who was so unhappy. She was looking back at herself, surprised that that was actually me. I do know of marriages in the organization who are doing good, so yeah, I agree, it's not all of them. But I can make my own decisions now, and that's the best part. It's not too late to change yourself. So here's a few references to Jehovah's Witness publications regarding women being in submission or not in submission. And what does a headship in a marriage really mean? The Awake, January 2008, says, as the head of the wife, the husband is to take the lead in the family, with the wife following his lead and respecting his headship. And then in the Watchtower of May 15th, 2010, Women, Why Submit to Headship? It says, God's Word tells the wife to maintain a submissive attitude toward the unbelieving husband. Even an unbelieving husband. And her good conduct can influence him to consider what it is that motivates her to behave in such a fine manner. So wifely subjection, what does it mean? Awake, 1996. It says the primary goal in the spirit of a wife's godly subjection is to please Jehovah. And how do you please Jehovah? Well, by cooperating with her husband and supporting his decisions. Wow, that's like a circular thing. It's a 3-chord thing, with Jehovah in there, but you're only obeying Jehovah if you obey your husband. So it sounds like it's Jehovah and your husband that's kind of got the control of the marriage. You only have a third say. Circular reasoning, folks. Circular reasoning. Okay. Divorce in the organization. How does that all happen? Well, this will be a good one. I was divorced in the organization, I guess. Well, I left the organization. The ex-wife left the organization for a period. A lot of JWs do that. They leave for a while and go do a bunch of bad stuff, and then they go back. So, divorce in the organization. Can Jehovah's Witnesses get divorced? Dr. Lee. He says the organization has strict scriptural grounds regarding divorce. It also enforces abusive marriages. Many have marriages where the man was abusive in some way and the wife can beg to have a divorce. But unless it's sleeping with another woman or man, it's not scripturally correct to have a divorce. And if they hit you, what did you do for him to want to do that? It's all about victim blame. Divorce, too, is taboo. Counseling is rare and often ineffective, since any advice must align with theocratic principles than the modern psychology. So, excuse me. Here's the anonymous Mike. He's a former JW. He says, my wife and I have been counseled a few times by elders about our marriage. Some have even asked questions about what we do in the bedroom. They know everything, or at least they try to. And looking back, it's so creepy. My wife and I were fortunate to grow up together and fall in love. That didn't happen for most of my family, though. Some have the most boring, lifeless marriages. And I feel bad for them. We woke up around the same time, and I've been in therapy, like real counseling. But the hardest part was getting those elders off our backs. And the article goes on to say, women suffer in silence, especially in congregations where male headship is harshly enforced. Men bottle their dissatisfaction, and both sides fear confiding in anyone lest it be seen as negative talk or spiritual weakness. And notice something very wrong with the Elder's Manual reference shown below. We're going to look at it. Divorce in the organization is only scriptural, okay, if it involves sexual immorality. Not if you were physically or sexually abused yourself, not because you guys have differences, not because you just wanted to. This instantly removes our critical thinking and diminishes our wants and needs. So here it is from the Elder's Handbook 2024, Chapter 12, Determining a Scriptural Freedom to Remarry. There's 3 requirements must be met. There must be clear evidence of porneia, sexual immorality. Number 2, the innocent mate must reject the adulterer, showing no intent to resume the marriage. And there must be a final legal divorce. So that's what must happen. Now, one partner in, one partner out, that's difficult. There's a lot of that happening now with people waking up at different times. So then it becomes a tug of war, like in the picture here. What have you personally seen with marriages when one person wakes up from the organization while the other is still in? Dr. Lee says that is its own challenge, especially when there is love there. But now we have 2 people living in 2 different worlds. Sometimes people can make it work if the partner who is still in is somewhat liberal and accepting that they love them. And even if I won't see them in the paradise. So it's pretty much a death sentence for the marriage if they are not aligned. That's true, because if you're not in the truth, the so-called truth, you're going to die. So if you have so many ties and so many years, it's much harder not to feel selfish for wanting different things from your partner. It's not selfish, though. It really is a tough situation. Now, if there's no communication and one is thriving and learning about themselves while the other is not, they are in a way doomed. If there's no communication. So if you have one person in the organization that's going out in service all the time, going to meetings all the time, and the other person isn't, the relationship is doomed. And being a Jehovah's Witness is about embracing stagnation. I need to be the same, keep being the same until death comes, and then we'll be free. And then someone wakes up going, oh my God, I have been stagnant. I want to do all the things. So the person waking up will feel hindered and limited by the judgmental lens of their partner. So their growth will be stunted, and then it'll be upsetting for their partner who is saying the same thing, and then all of a sudden their partner has different needs and wants and becomes a stranger overnight. Some people will cling to it because it's all they know and will have that sunk cost fallacy, thinking there's nothing else out there in life for them. It's like this. You have one person that's waking up and they say, hey, I'm not going to the assembly this year. The other person thinks it's the end of the world in the marriage. They really take it hard. They think it's the end of the world. He's not going to the assembly. So, there's nothing else out there. So by the time you are an adult and a Jehovah's Witness, you have no idea how to handle different situations that bother the mental shield the organization has created for you. Leaving this organization can be difficult because once you're out, you almost have to mimic others around you to feel more normal. And you want to learn how to act and understand the social norms you may have missed. And I'm not saying these social norms are right or wrong or good or bad. We're all not comfortable with new, so the odd feeling you get when you're trying something new, so normal, you just didn't know about them. And this was me and also Dr. Lee having to Google everything confusing to us because we were not in touch with social norms, terms, media, etc. And I find that myself. My good wife, she bails me out all the time, even for acronyms. I don't even get a lot of the acronyms. So Anonymous, the next one is Anonymous Karina. She's a former Jehovah's Witness. And she says it all happened so slowly, but now it feels like a constant storm between us. My husband is still very conflicted. I woke up about a year ago through my worldly brother, and I planned on expressing my concerns about the religion's teachings in the most gentle ways, backed up by documents and articles. And I have a pile of evidence from online, but when I presented it, it came off as an attack on him. And it seems his love for Jehovah and his family are more important. And it clicked after some time had passed that I wouldn't want to be with someone who wouldn't listen to me. Anyways, So we're separated, unsure what to do at the moment. Good for you. You don't want to be in a toxic relationship where you're not loved. So Miss Usato goes on to say, it's important for me to express that not every Jehovah's Witness marriage is doomed, toxic, or just a bad setup. Some find the love of their lives in the organization, and some get out together or decide they are happier as Jehovah's Witnesses. It depends on each individual's personality and what they feel is necessary to be happy. And it takes more than just leaving the organization and starting over. It takes building and growing separate and together so that you can thrive in a relationship full of trust, loyalty, boundaries, and love. So a lifelong investment, something to be wary of. This is from Anonymous Anthony. He's a former Jehovah's Witness. He says, I almost woke my mother up, but she is in her 80s. It already hurt her knowing that the truth was not the truth for me. And it deeply disturbed her, and she won't hear anything negative about the organization. It's different for her who has spent her life this way. She's older, and basically telling her she missed out on so much and that there's no paradise or resurrection, it would break both of our hearts. I felt it best to keep the peace, and if she wishes to question the teachings, she knows I'm here. Otherwise, I would rather not shatter her core beliefs. Well, isn't that nice? Yeah, sometimes, people have to come out on their own. We can't, how Jehovah's Witnesses try to push the so-called truth on people? I did it all my life. You can't do that with helping people to wake up. They have to wake up on their own. You can say things, I guess, but... So here it is. Being an elderly person in the Jehovah's Witness community can be complex because they have spent all or most of their life as a Jehovah's Witness. They grew up with the teachings, the publications were their lifeline and advisor. The conventions and the assemblies are their social gatherings. Field service to them is doing good in God's eyes. So their habits and routines are typically surrounded by what the organization expects of you forever. And they may have turned down higher education and careers, and for sure have denied family milestones like birthdays, holidays, and even family reunions, folks. Let's say your worldly family throws on a reunion. You're talked out of it by your GW wife. Anyways, higher education. This deep investment can make it very difficult to question or walk away from the belief system, even if doubts arise. I do not want to say it's too late for them, because you can always change whenever you want to. But if you have an older family member who is thoroughly indoctrinated in this organization, a decision to wake them up should be heavily considered. What would be best for them at their age and in their hard-pressed mental state? Very, very good thinking points here, folks. Here's the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witness. You see all these, there's all these faces there, but you don't really see anybody. It's just a bunch of people. Suppression of individual thought. Jehovah's Witnesses are encouraged to avoid independent thinking and instead rely on the governing body for spiritual guidance. And for elderly members who have followed these teachings for decades, there may be a lifelong habit of suppressing personal doubts or critical thoughts to stay faithful. Expressing disagreement or asking the wrong questions can lead to isolation or even disfellowshipping. And confusion around doctrinal changes. Over the years, the organization has made numerous doctrinal changes, often called New Light, and such as revisions and beliefs about the generation that would see Armageddon or blood transfusions. For older members who were taught one thing in the 1960s or 70s, and now they hear something different, like growing beards. And this can create confusion or cognitive dissonance, yet they're expected to accept the new teachings without question. Fear of losing community. As people age, their social support becomes especially important, and for elderly Jehovah's Witnesses, the congregation may be their entire world. The threat of disfellowshipping, being cut off completely for challenging teachings, can make it incredibly hard to speak up or even admit internal conflict. And existential pressure. Existential pressure. Did I say that right? There's often an intense focus on being worthy for survival during Armageddon or for resurrection into the paradise. And for older members nearing the end of their lives, this pressure can create anxiety. Have I done enough? Will I make it? This is compounded if their health is failing or if they've experienced loss or they're trying to reconcile that with the promise of faith. And then that's when the organization sends elders in and they get their whole estate. We'll talk about that in a bit. Next, the scheme of donating to the organization. It's the next topic. Another important thing to know is that the organization tends to push the elderly into donating their land, bond, and precious items. They even talk about including gold and jewelry, etc., to the organization for when they pass. A November 2015 article, it says, Show Appreciation for Jehovah's Generosity, gives them various ways to contribute to their worldwide work, heavily adding that Jehovah wants them to be generous, and this would be the last thing they could do for Jehovah. So here's what they bring up in that. They talk about wills and trusts, bequeathing property or money through a legal executed will or trust agreement, insurance and retirement plans, naming an entity used by Jehovah's Witnesses as a beneficiary, bank accounts, setting up accounts payable to the organization upon death, stocks and bonds, donating as an outright gift or through a transfer on death agreement, real estate, donating saleable property with options to reserve a life estate, and donating their precious items such as jewelry, electronics, etc. And please be aware of the tight clutch the organization has on the fully devoted elderly Jehovah's Witnesses, folks, who can be easily persuaded. This is a problem all over the world. So thanks for bringing that up like that, Miss Usato. The closing paragraph here is, so is it love? And there's the picture. This looks like a nice picture of a paradise or something. Well, here it is. Behind the polished meetings and the smiling faces, children are learning about what the organization wants rather than what's good for them. There are teenagers battling depression, anxiety, and the heavy weight of conditional love. Young adults and married couples tend to feel confused, lost, stagnant, and unable to express what is going on. But the uneasy feelings, they're there. Then there are the elderly, some who feel content with the limited and constricting lifestyle. It's the only one they know. These articles, they're not attacks, they're lifelines. And they are cries for empathy, understanding, and change. To love someone truly means to see them, to hear them, and to walk beside them, even when their path takes them beyond the walls of the Kingdom Hall. You do not have to be with someone to love them, but loving yourself is the most important thing. The truth is that love does not endure all things. Love shouldn't require shunning. Love shouldn't diminish your self-worth. Love shouldn't withstand abuse of any sort. And love shouldn't remove your critical thinking, your boundaries, and your life experiences. And folks, love shouldn't make you lose touch with yourself or reality. all of these articles that it's not love. It boils down to the fact that if the love you're receiving and giving is conditional, then it's not love. Well, thanks again, Miss Usato, for writing these articles, beautiful articles. And if you want to know more about Miss Usato, she adds transparency to the Watchtower's teachings. She's an excellent journalist, and she has additional information about this topic. And if you want to talk to her, you can email her at missusato@proton.me, and you can hit in here and you can look at some of her other articles that she has. Of course, there's the thumbnail. We used that on the thumbnail, but here's a lot of the articles that she has written, and they're posted here on Avoid JW. So Miss Usato, well, she's a bit famous in our community. She's all over Avoid JW, and her articles are fact, well researched, very well thought out, very well done. So thank you again to Miss Usato for bringing all of this information to our attentions. It's not love. And you have certainly showed us what love is. Love is being together in all circumstances. And that's what we say on this show. Keep living your day with love. So thanks again, folks, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Bye for now.